Okay, we're live. All righty. I'm going to give everybody a chance to migrate on over from the stream here. Thank you so much, everyone, for those of you who were able to stop by and check out the premiere of my latest video, Rise of the Field Fillers. And no, that is not the only video that's going to be in it. It's going to be a multi-episode series, and you can pretty much tell who the subject of the next video is going to be, having seen that one, and the script is well on its way. I'd like to get them done as quickly as possible. It may just be once a month, but man, I'd love to get them out a lot quicker than that. But I think it's going to be a real fun series and feature a lot of these different teams. So look forward to more of that in the time ahead here. So again, up in the live stream, questions on anything from the video, by all means, definitely let me know, and I'll do that. I'm going to go ahead and share the link here again on the Twitter just to make sure everybody has that. And we will certainly talk about the 2021 schedule. I know that it's almost old news at this point, given that I'm sure everybody had their attack at it yesterday. But much like the big news day that we had last week with Ross Chastain and the Michael Jordan team and everything else, it's going to be a very different scenario here on this end. So we'll see what the situation is. We get okay, I thought we lost connection there. Oh, hang on. Is it the microphone here or the audio okay? Uh-oh, it disconnected. Let's try that again. Hang on. Oh, we're back again? Okay, I stopped talking for a second. We're good? Okay, we're good. Okay, right on. It's still a technical thing. It's still working this out here. I want to keep doing this from last week. It seemed like the audio. Okay, you can hear me? Okay, right on. So we'll stick with this here. Yeah, I mean, this is a series that, again, I was meaning to do for a while, and you know, it's something that was originally going to be a book. It was, in fact, going to be my next book after the JD one. You know, it's really, you know, turned out to be kind of a very different project in this sense. I think that the more that I looked at it, the more it seemed like it was going to be better to actually set up as a video series instead, because you got a lot more of the visuals, especially 2004 with the level of coverage that you had back then, being able to talk about a lot of these teams and them getting some coverage there. And, you know, really it kind of occurred to me. I mean, I was thinking about what was going to be next on the channel, and it kind of built up its own momentum there. So that was really going to be, this first episode was going to be basically the opening chapter to the book. So it'll be an interesting experience from that. And again, this is far from the only part. I have at least, gosh, like at least 8 or 9 different parts that I'm looking at working on here. And you'll get an idea of how it's going to be organized here, especially in these next couple here, to get a good idea of it. So certainly, yeah, I know I've done standalone videos here in the past. I guess we did a kind of a interrelated one between the Darrell Waltrip one and the history of retired drivers. But you're going to get a lot of information on this. Seeing some questions again about the the issue with the small teams there. You know, yeah, it's going to be it's an interesting subject, an interesting time period, because again, you think about the time period in the sport. You know, I mean, for me, you know, it was something I remember pretty clearly, but you know, maybe for newer fans, you know, I know some people that either just got into the sport at that time or maybe even just that year. You really did have a precipitous drop in these number of teams, but it wasn't getting talked about because, of course, that is generally perceived as the, you know, the time of the peak of the sport. I think a consequence was, I mean, there was either, I'm not much of an economist. This was going to be something I was going to kind of dig more into if I did it in a book instead of a video. But it seemed like for whatever reason, there was just a lot of ups and downs in that period between about 2000 and 2004. And really it kind of continued. It kind of overlaps a little bit with the video we did on the Ginn Racing situation, with that being another peak in 2007, much like we had in the mid 90s, like 93, like 94, 95 kind of time period. And again, like 2000 to 2001 time period, you just had, I think it was just a very volatile market in that time. And for some reason in 2004, it was just an even deeper pit than the sport had really seen since 1992. And that was really the thing that was interesting too, is when you look at the 92 season, again, much like 2004, when it's talked about, it's like, oh my gosh, that was the most competitive season ever, incredible championship, incredible racing, incredible figures, Richard Petty's retirement. But at the same time, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just Desert Storm or whatever else was going on at the time, there were difficulties in filling what were at most about 40 car fields back then. And even short tracks where they had even fewer entries already in there, even having trouble filling those spots. And you really did have a lack of a lot of these teams that were actually able to enter the sport in that time period. So it was certainly a challenge in that, and that's really kind of the interesting thing that happened with that. But it's really it's really a challenging story to kind of cover in that sense, because I, of course, when everybody talks about 2004, it's always the chase and it's Junior's great season and Jeremy Mayfield punching his ticket. And there was a lot that NASCAR could point at. But much like we talked about in the 2000 season, where it had this very serious safety controversy in the background of, the NASCAR 2000 season and about to be the handover for the new broadcast contract, you really did have the same kind of a scenario, more of an economic disaster than a safety issue, where there just weren't enough teams. And these people that filled in, we'll go through them in a more, methodical approach here in these future episodes, which is why it isn't just one video. I know I was trying to make it as clear as possible. This was multi-episode series here, which will be different from the past ones, because I could consolidate it all into like 1 hour and a half video, but I think I would miss a lot of details with a lot of these, which is also the same reason it didn't end up being a book. So, but bear with me on this. I do have it all planned out in terms of which drivers and teams I want to talk about and which ones I want to kind of focus on, and have those be kind of self-contained ones to build on this one. And that'll, again, become apparent and certainly in the next video, and I would believe the next one after that. And I do have some ideas on that to kind of expand this even further, especially in conjunction with the Livestream, to try to get some bonus content to tie with this. I'm still kind of planning out that aspect of it there, but we'll get some more content there to kind of build on this too, because I think my thinking with this is I want to kind of give NASCAR its like defunct land, basically. I want to kind of create a series where you have a continuing narrative built over several episodes, and I can kind of, space things out a little bit more, get a little bit more research in there, and then really allow like each episode to kind of be a self-contained thing. So I look forward to you guys joining me on this journey here. There's a lot of information that I already had set up for the book when I was deciding to do it at the time, which was why this episode came together, not necessarily as quickly as I expected. I know the last video, the Bobby Ginn video, is back in August, but I think these later ones will be able to come together a little bit quicker, and we'll get a good series going, especially since we're getting pretty close to the end of this year. I'd like to be able to certainly continue this over the off season and give you guys some off season content from there. And I think it's going to be a really interesting look into the sport, and maybe some figures that just don't get talked about. And quite honestly, I think this was a series that I think is more fitting of what I do over at the NASCAR website and a lot of my coverage that focuses on the smaller teams. We haven't really done that much of that with the videos on the YouTube channel, just really in generally. They've been more, seasons, I recall. Certainly the 2000 season, we talk about Jerry Nadeau, we talk about 3 Before February, different kinds of obscurity in the sport. But in this one here, I think this is going to fit very well with the theme of course, following these small teams as we have since 2009, and getting some interesting stuff from there. So, so this is going to be a thing. This series, I see a comment there, Carolyn, there. You raised a good question. Is it going to expand to Xfinity trucks and ARCA? Yes and no. The focus is going to certainly be on the Cup Series in this particular time period, but there may be some overlap into other series as well. A lot of these different figures that you're going to be introduced to in this series had a lot of overlap in other racing series, in some cases even outside of NASCAR, much like we see over even to a degree the Cup Series today, where you have guys like James Davison running in the Cup Series and everything now. So you're going to have something very much like that, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation on that. And you get kind of a preview of it from the montages, the beginning and the end of the episode there, get kind of an idea of which teams we're certainly going to be talking about. And each one of those that are featured in there, they're going to factor into the series in some way or another. One of them, actually, a little bit of overlap, is going to be on the Junie Donlavey team, which was brought up in the video when they lost Hills Brothers as a sponsorship. That's certainly not the end of the story for the late Junie Donlavey's team. They're going to feature into at least one other episode in there, and that's going to be one to talk about. So that's going to be a really interesting one to talk about. But I do have the next episode picked out. I'm going to have the announcement on that episode first and foremost for those of you in the Livestream of all levels, because I have the video announcements on that, and we'll get that together for you very soon. And then, yeah, the next episode, I'd love to have that going. Gosh, if I can get in the next 2 weeks, that'd be fantastic. But the longest, I would say, sometime this month. If it ends up being towards the end of the month, we'll see. But I feel good about where it's coming. It's just a matter. It's not so much the writing is coming together pretty well. It's the editing that's just taking a long time, and but we're getting there. But I think that'll be interesting. So I hope you really liked that story. Again, I have to big kudos to the sources that I was able to consult on that. Jayski's side, of course, was key with a lot of that back then. On top of just stuff that just remember from these old broadcasts back in 2004. But Perry Allen Wood's book, Declarations of Stock Car Independence. Again, I don't mind plugging this one at all. I was very impressed with that. It's I believe you can get it as an ebook for pretty cheap online. That's where how I had read it. But stories like that one from Curtis Kreider are very typical of that. And it's a very interesting book where Mr. Wood went to Darlington for a retro race weekend. And they had a whole lot of these other drivers there that were independent drivers. And, James Hilton is in it, the late James Hilton, and others are in there. And talking about the way the sport used to be and a lot of interesting stories. And it's literally just, kind of like the stuff you see over the website, where it's an account of kind of the driver's career and key moments in there, and a lot of humorous moments, much like the one with Kreider and Baker that you saw in the video there. Kudos to him on that. I think it was an excellent book. I'd highly recommend it. If you're looking for something to check out there, I'd recommend that as well. But yes, the book is called Declarations of Stock Car Independence. You can check out I put the link to his Amazon page in the description for the Field Fillers video. So you can check that out. There's a free sample on there, I believe, so you can check out kind of what it is. But I think he talks to like a dozen different independent drivers. And one thing that's particularly interesting is like a lot of them have like a Wendell Scott story in there. And, unfortunately, the book came together after Wendell passed away. But everybody talks, so many different of these drivers like talk about Wendell and other independent drivers that time too. I don't remember if JD gets mentioned in there, but, maybe to a degree there. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in there from the sport and for, a long period, not just the earlier parts of the years, but so forth. But that'll be an interesting one to definitely check out. You guys are pretty close to guessing. I think you can pretty much get an idea of what episode 2 is going to be about in this series, but we'll certainly have that. Zach Baumgartner, thank you so much for the super chat. Shelmerdine arc is my favorite arc of the anime. Well, mine as well. Kirk Shelmerdine is absolutely going to be in this series. And, I'm going to look to kind of expand something more in this and kind of, I'd love to have this thing just pick up momentum on its own, which is why, again, it's not just one single video. But I think it's going to be an interesting one to certainly talk about. And Cam K Racing, when you talk about field fillers being different from start and parks, that is going to be something we'll certainly talk about in this series as well. There's again, a lot of ins and outs in here that are worth going over. And you can see that there's a little bit of a difference just from what was discussed in this video, where you have, for example, in 1992, when you had a lot of the ARCA drivers filling fields versus start and parks or the grocery getters of Jimmy Means' team, you had kind of that difference already back then. And to a degree, that's kind of the same now. Even when you see it in the Xfinity series, you don't see start and parks in the Cup Series anymore, but in the Xfinity series, that still can be a factor in there. So that'll be an interesting story in that. But yeah, I'm very excited about this. I couldn't wait to get this one. I had a hard time not rushing to throw this one together in there. But I really wanted to kind of make sure that this was as firm a foundation as possible to build on. And I'm glad, I'm pleased you guys like the graphics and stuff too, with the showing the size of the field. I think that was really the hardest part to explain in when I was thinking of making it a book, was describing how much the field had fluctuated. But you can see in that progress there, just you had a combination of sponsors that fell through and things of that nature. It could just been just simple bad luck, and all these things came together, and you had an exceptionally lean year in 2004. And it opened the door for a lot of these teams, some that were already around, maybe on the verge of collapsing, some that weren't around, and or maybe were in other series and taking a look into it. And those are going to be the teams that you're going to meet in this series and learn more about. And I think the result is going to be something very exciting for these next few weeks and months here on the YouTube channel. So again, I appreciate so much. We had 200 people, I believe, at the peak there in the chat there towards the end of the video. I can't thank you guys enough there for your support, and definitely share the link around there so we can have everybody else get in on the ride here too, and talk more about that series as well. All right, make sure I didn't miss anything else here. I had to unplug my mouse to get the microphone plugged in here, so I'm using the touchpad, which I'm not too crazy about. Okay, there we go. Scrolling it up there. And okay. Auto Rockin' Racing, yeah, 94. I saw your comment earlier. I think you were in the chat there as well during the video, yeah, about Hideo Fukuyama. That was a tricky part too, is the difference between full-time and part-time teams. Some of those teams you saw disappear from that particular graphic, they were still actually active in NASCAR, but only as part-time efforts, and that's when they were kind of eliminated from it. And some of them may actually pop up a little bit more in these future videos, especially when you had a challenge where something like Larry Foyt's effort in the 14 car being a big part of that as well. But that 2004 Daytona 500, it's a very interesting race, and a lot of these other competitions, these different teams, because when you talk about the 2004 Daytona 500, of course you talk about juniors winning it. But when they even play repeats of it, they kind of play very little of the race itself until the closing laps, when Junior's making the move on Tony Stewart and Scott Wimmer's, what was it, fuel only or two-tire stop, whatever got him into the top 5 there, and Ward Burton's old car. There's a big wreck that Michael Waltrip was in, but you see very little else of the race. And a big part of that, again, is the strength of the field. And that's something, again, I really want to hammer, and certainly over on the website as well. Is that, again, the strength of the overall field is really, you don't measure it by the strong cars, because you're always going to have fast cars, even if it's compared to, whatever else is out there. It's the slow cars out there. And some of those teams that closed down in the first part of this, 2001, 2002, they were steady mid-pack teams. They'd be the equivalent of something like a JTG Darty Racing today, or, something kind of that nature, where they're not complete back markers, but solidly mid-pack, and every once in a while can get some good runs out there. Stacy Compton, for example, that 92 Melling car, that was where Chad Knaus was the crew chief and was working with Stacy Compton before he ended up landing with Johnson. And so many of these other programs, Cal Wells' team, the PPI Motorsports effort, that team has come up time and time again in a lot of these videos I've done. But that's because, they had a real concerted effort to build this program up back in 2000 from open wheel racing into stock cars. And in 2001, they wanted to get to 2 cars and put Andy Houston in there. And they had McDonald's as a sponsor, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for them, and that effort kind of collapsed. So you just had a very different time period in that. So but this will be an interesting story. You're going to get a much more critical look at these teams back then, and really what else was going on behind the scenes of a lot of key moments in the sport. That's kind of why the opening kind of gets that stuff out of the way and says, okay, this stuff happened, but forget about that. We're going to talk about this part of the story. And I'll tell you what, it's the kind of thing that makes me, the reason I think I'm particularly excited about this is almost like going into a time machine and then actually trying to cover the sport as if I had NASCAR going in 2004. I couldn't have done it back then. I was in my third year, between my third year and fourth year of college, and I was on the rowing team back then, and I pretty much didn't have that much discretionary time. I had about just enough time just to watch the races on Sunday, and that was it. But I do remember watching that Rockingham race and a very different complexion to the field from that versus Daytona, which is certainly going to be a big focus in episode 2 and going forward from there. But yeah. Cam K Racing, is it specific to drivers or teams? I would say both. It's going to definitely be a focus because there's a lot of overlap, much like the question earlier about which series. The focus is going to be on the Cup Series in 2004. I would say the focus is probably going to be more on the team side of it, but it's certainly going to be about drivers as well because it's in some cases, you mentioned Morgan Shepherd and everything goes hand in hand. So there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to come in here, and I think it's going to be really cool when we get on from there. Fuel only for Wimmer, yeah, I think you're right on that one. There was something like that. Todd Bodine, yeah. I mean, again, we're gonna some of the drivers that got mentioned in episode 1, they'll come up again. But again, I think the other reason I want to make this an episodic series instead of just one standalone video is I know from some reactions to some of the other videos I've done that are longer, maybe it's like too much information in a short amount of time. So let's parse it out a little bit here and make it a little bit easier to digest. Maybe the story will be easier to run together. And of course, I've started a playlist already on the channel. So when we get multiple episodes on there, you'll be able to just play them all in order and, watch them in one large, binge watch, I guess, if you could do something like that. That's my vision for how that goes. And that'll be interesting. In terms of field fillers, you really don't see this kind of stuff anymore in the Cup Series, at least. The closest thing we have to it, I guess, would be like a Motorsports Business Management with Carl Long, who, of course, is going to figure into this series as well, as some of you could tell from this one. But we saw this last week with the 2 Motorsports Business Management cars having trouble at Las Vegas in the early laps and the 49 car falling out very early on. These are going to be kind of the challenges that, are nothing new to the sport. But some other features there. Yeah, Rick Ware Racing and Starcom. Yeah, those teams kind of go in the same, group there. Back when we had Premium Motorsports, of course, now that's in Rick Ware. You have that kind of deal. Spire Motorsports now also lumped into the Rick Ware effort. Those would be other ones to kind of talk about. Tommy Baldwin, BJ McLeod. Those are also tied in with Rick Ware. That's the interesting thing too, is conglomeration of this. What you'll see in this series is going to be much more about these teams kind of being on their own and being completely separate. At least that was my understanding of it. As this research has been going, it seems like everybody was kind of on their, maybe they would help each other as much as they could, but a lot of these organizations had very different approaches and very different goals and very different resources available to them, both in terms of talent, equipment, how much of the schedule they were running. As I mentioned, Kirk, the 72 car, Kirk Shelmerdine's car, was the only one that actually committed to running the full season after running the Daytona 500. There was one other team that ran almost the full season, which will also get featured in this series. So technically, there were 38 full-time teams, but really, if you turn in terms of actually attempting all 36 races, there were just 37 for 43 spots. And as you can tell from that, that's a huge issue there, a huge gap that has to be filled. And that's going to certainly be talked about in the series here. So again, big thanks to everybody for checking that out. Make sure you share that link out there so you can so other people can check it out, and we'll go from there. Oh, hang on, move this here and get that there. Okay, so let's jump into the other big story that we have to talk about, and I don't want to lead people on too long here. Before getting into this, we have to talk about the 2021 season. Yes, we do, and yes, we do. So, if we again, any other questions you have on the video or anything like that, I'll certainly be open to that as well. But we'll certainly talk about the schedule here and lump that into this discussion here as well. I'm just going to pull it up here. As a refresher from yesterday, we certainly got to talk about Circuit of the Americas, which we touched on a little bit before, the dirt race at Bristol, the fact that there's now going to be a ton of road courses, but no Kentucky or Chicagoland. A lot to cover on here. And let me get the graphic here again, just so I can kind of look at it here in the meantime. Schedule released, introducing 3 new tracks. 5 decades in the making. Yeah, it took them that long. I mean, you want to talk about that? I mean, there's a lot of overlap between this and the 2004 season. Because in 2004, that was a big thing that was going on in that year, where the theory was that, all these things were changing at the same time. And some of them maybe were kind of out of NASCAR's hands. Unical 76 being swapped out for Sunoco. Winston there were already heavy restrictions on tobacco advertising before 2003, and then handing over to Nextel. But then the playoff structure that Brian France brought in. Then you had the new Nextel Cup trophy, which was literally made by Tiffany and Company, not the big wood trophy from whoever designed it from back in the 70s and keeping that in the current year. A very different time frame there. There's a lot of overlap in this, and I think a lot of the decisions that were made in this particular schedule realignment probably have their roots in 2004, where they made some of these changes and people just didn't like it. And we've had so many of these controversies and discussions and sometimes very angry discussions about the schedule and things happening in that sense. I mean, you literally did have the Southern 500 get moved to November, and they said it was the final Southern 500 because it was getting moved to May the following year. And even though it was a 500-mile race, they just gave it a whole other name, and they didn't even call it the Southern 500. It wasn't for years until it actually got the date back, and then even further after that, before it became the throwback weekend that we have now. And it's taken, of course, now until, excuse me, really this year with the 2 races at Darlington, just worked out that way, or 3 races really when you had the midweek one, but still having 2 dates next year. That's going to be kind of the interesting thing to certainly look at. Let's see. But, I think that's, hang on. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to miss you there. Ghost of Saltwater. Thank you so much for, again, the super chat there. Bristol dirt equals facepalm.jpg. Well, that is certainly one view of it. And I have to agree to a certain extent. I think that's going to be difficult. And I think, we'll go ahead and lead off with that. The Bristol dirt race, I see that they're trying to bring. It's cool to bring dirt back into the Cup Series, and have a dirt race that's a points race in the Cup Series for the first time since 1970. Obviously, since 1970, we've had the Eldora Dirt Derby in the Truck Series. It's been special. It's been successful, as far as I can tell. Unfortunately, got squashed this year with everything that's the extenuating circumstances of this. What I don't like about, there's a couple problems with it, I don't like being a wet blanket with a lot of this stuff here, but it sounds to me like something that NASCAR does over the years is they'll do something to kind of try to, cover up or make up for something else that happens. And this feels like Eldora is going to be off the truck schedule next year. I don't know that for sure, but this sounds like something that they're kind of preparing for. And they're like, oh, well, we can't lose this dirt event. Let's put it in the Cup Series. And, that'll be cool. I don't know if that's the case. I'm kind of concerned about that. We'll see what happens on that side of it, because we haven't seen the Xfinity of the truck schedule. It could be completely off base, and I hope that I am, because it would be great. That's an event that I would love to cover if it still stays on the schedule. That's going to be kind of an issue with that. It puzzles me that the strategy, of course, the big elephant in the room, why are they putting a bunch of dirt on an existing track rather than just going to another dirt track that has big stands, that has, good facilities and everything. And don't tell me that there are dirt tracks that don't have large facilities when you have something like Knoxville Nationals or, any of these other dirt track races out there have capacity crowds, people shoulder to shoulder in the stands. That's at least, the kind of attendance figures that they would look for in that, and they could work something out with that. But this is going to be a really tricky kind of, situation with that. Why are they doing this? If my understanding was originally that NASCAR had these contracts with these tracks for a certain number of years. Now, apparently that's changed, where now it's based year to year on attendance. Now, at the same time, the stuff that happened this year has kind of thrown that attendance part out the window, because you have a lot of tracks like just this last week in Vegas where they haven't let anybody in. So does that mean it's a hard reset? And, it's a mulligan, and these tracks are still going to be contracted to actually have a date next year? because of what happened this year and being an unforeseen thing and some tracks not even having dates. I'm not sure. I'm sure the people in Chicagoland and Kentucky would have an issue with that because they got cut from the schedule period without ever knowing that was going to be the last race. Shades of Rockingham in 2004 under different but very similar circumstances. So that makes me wonder, putting dirt on Bristol is the kind of thing you do when you can't get out of having 2 races at Bristol and, that you're beholden to having a second race at the track there. I don't get why they don't just run it at another dirt track. I don't get why they don't just run it at Eldora. I don't get why they don't run it at Knoxville. I don't get it why they don't run it at places like Las Vegas or Charlotte that have dirt tracks near the facility. That doesn't make any sense to me. But, again, NASCAR sometimes goes for the complicated solution rather than the simple one. And that seems to be the situation here. I also don't get it. Now, if the contracts don't exist, if the contracts aren't there to lock in 2 dates, or dates at certain tracks, and it is a free for all, and places like Chicagoland and Kentucky can get set, why are we going back to having 2 dates at tracks again? Why are we doing 2 dates at Darlington? Why are we doing 2 dates at Atlanta? Why are we doing that? Why do we keep the Pocono doubleheader weekend? Why are those things still there? When at the same time you've cut a race from Michigan, you've cut a race from Dover. I still think, the strategy should be 1 race at each of these tracks. I mean, they seem to be very afraid of changing that, and I don't know what's gumming up the works there. If this deal doesn't exist where these tracks are locked in for a certain number of years, and they could just simply completely get rid of 2 tracks that only had 1 date, so they have no recourse at all. Why then couldn't they? Why are they adding dates to 2 tracks? I know Atlanta's got that deal where they're redeveloping the area outside of it, but that doesn't entitle you to a second date. That's Francis Furco logic. I don't like that. I didn't like what they did with Texas. Speaking of which, who knows? Maybe the Texas All-Star race is going to be amazing, but it wouldn't even be an issue having a race at the All-Star race at Texas if it weren't for getting a second date for no real reason back in 2005. So it's absurd. Just do 36 races at 36 different tracks, or cut down the number of races and do, if you have some redundancies in there and some tracks that are just too similar to each other, then get it down to maybe closer to 30 or 32 races. It gets to a point, really, and I've talked about this a lot in the past, where it's very difficult to cover a lot of events over a long season. It's hard to remember what happened in a particular race, or more than 1 or 2 things that happened in a race. A great deal of stuff can happen from one moment to the other. But for example, like I'm having a hard time remembering what happened during all those Dover races on that weekend with Indianapolis, and that wasn't even that long ago. What happened at what happened in the spring race at Las Vegas. I was trying to think back to that before we had the race this past weekend at Vegas. That's kind of a thing, something like that. But I mean, I appreciate them trying, but they're trying in the way that NASCAR always does, which is half measures. NASCAR has been the master of half measures for years. I love the sport. I love the people in it. But my goodness, why is it always, I feel like I do this meme every year on Twitter where it's like shouting at shouting at a person that can't hear very well. And they're saying like, okay, hey, we want big engine, small blade. Oh yeah, All-Star race at Texas. That's a great idea. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want this big motor and small blade. And it's like, no, yeah, that'll be great. Let's put dirt on Bristol. It's like, where are these ideas coming from? Like, okay, I'm sure that NASCAR probably heard, okay, the fans want dirt tracks. The fans want more road courses. Now, to their credit, I like the approach they did with the road courses. I think Road America is a great venue. I've enjoyed William Saki, our ARCA correspondent, done a great job covering the Xfinity action out there. I think they put on a great show for the Cup Series. I don't know much about Circuit of the Americas, but anything's worth a try at this point. And I am beyond happy that Sears Point is back on there for next year. And in fact, on the same weekend that it basically had back in 1992 when we first went out there. So I'm okay with that. And of course, Watkins Glen was going to come back. That's one of their biggest sells. So, Charlie Birch and my friends up there in New York, I'm glad that they're getting their venue back. There was a lot of concerns about that coming into this, especially with the political climate and who knows what's going to be what. I'm glad to see that. But again, these are It's bizarre that these are half measures, much like the Nashville Super Speedway idea. When everybody's saying Nashville Fairgrounds, it's like, oh no, we can't have that. We can have this. It's like, well, why? Can we ask the question, why is this not possible? Why is this possible when the track's also been sitting dormant for years, but this isn't possible? It's I don't know. It's insane, but um, that's kind of the tricky situation from that. But yeah. I mean, there's a lot good there though. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Again, I'm not entirely off the idea of, I mean, certainly 2 Darlington races. I mean, heck, that fits right in with the 2004 video. They've put on such a great show. They should have always had, if they're going to have 2 dates for these tracks, then the least they can do is give Darlington 2 dates. But I would rather they just still had that 1 date and the Southern 500 have its singular significance, much like Daytona having 1 date and having the 500 be of singular significance. I will admit, though, that the 400-mile race as the cutoff race for Daytona was a fantastic decision this year, and I was the most skeptical of it, and I will freely admit that I was completely wrong about it, at least this year. And I don't know how the fact that they didn't have that much issue with rain as I was expecting, or worse weather than that, that was highly entertaining for a cutoff race. And I think that it's going to be, I'd be very surprised if they go back on that. And I really, with all due respect to Richmond, I don't think they're going back there for that again. And we'll see what the situation is with that. Stephen Robert, yeah, I like your comment on that. Montreal, yeah, I think that would be a great venue. I would love to cover Montreal. I hate that I wasn't really into the whole media landscape at the time that they ran those races. I would love to cover that and see, because you got a lot of weird small teams out there, a lot of weird drivers and stuff that compete in it that you don't see all the time. It's like Sears Point was in the early 90s, these road ringers and stuff like that. I think it's very exciting. I hope with these road courses next year, we're going to see a return of maybe some of these longtime road course ringers like Ron Fellows and Boris Said, that sounded like they were pretty much done and retired completely and committing to their other business ventures. I'd love to see them back out there and give it another shot. I think that would be fantastic. Excuse me. Canadian Tire, yes, fantastic. It was Cam K, absolutely. Canadian Tire I loved covering that last year. Great people there, great facility, very down to earth, plenty of places to sit. You can hold a cup race there easy. They got no shortage of place to put people. Ghost of Saltwater, thank you so much again for the super chat here. And I see you're clarifying on the fairgrounds issue. Fairgrounds isn't possible because NASCAR is trying to bleed Nashville dry for money. I didn't read your full comment. To do the renovations, but the city won't give in. Well, it's a difficult situation. But see, political, as always, half measures. They're going to have the banquet there. They're going to have the Nashville Super Speedway. Okay, that's fine. I don't know how, it's presented. People on certain other channels are kind of trying to pitch this as like, oh, well, we need to run at the Nashville Super Speedway to show that racing is viable in Nashville, and then we'll be able to run at the short track. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how you don't put your best foot, you put your worst foot forward to say that, oh, well, what if the racing is bad? What if the racing is terrible there? And then nobody goes to it because the racing is terrible. Well, then you've just wasted an effort to conjure more interest in racing in Nashville. Now, I mean, again, I'd love to be wrong. I'd love for it to be like that one that Michael Waltrip won, where everybody spun out of the lead and you had a bizarre situation there. But that would be great. But I really don't know. I don't know. Oh yeah, Ron Fellows owns Canadian Tire. I know he had the school there. I didn't realize that he owned the track. Well, kudos to him. I think that would be all the more reason for him to get active in the series. The road courses are great. Now, I will condition that on another addition to the schedule. How angry do you think Denny Hamlin is right now that he's not going to win the Brickyard 400? That there's not going to be another race on the oval? That they're going to just run this road course race there? I think it's going to be a celebration like Hamlin winning Homestead earlier this year when it's no longer the championship race. Gotta say, I feel pretty bad for him here after losing it with that tire failure at the beginning of that race there. The Brickyard 400 is just a tragedy, I think, really, in NASCAR history. I don't think any other event has been as venerated or as anticipated or as big in the sport, only to be just completely scrubbed. And okay, yeah, they're still running in Indianapolis, but you guys and I all know it's not the Brickyard 400. They're not going to call it, even if they call it they might try to call it the Brickyard 400K or something, but it's not. You're running the oval, and that's a whole different deal. Now, it's not always been the best race, and that's to be admitted. I remember doing the starting grids for that race back in 2008 or so, and having to cherry pick certain moments, and it was a challenge even back then. That was before the tire failures, and really kind of set in motion this chain reaction that we've led to now, where now the event is just scrubbed off completely. It's an unfortunate deal, but it's very possible. It's strange to really think about. Was the Brickyard 400 a mistake? Should it have even happened? Maybe. I don't think NASCAR running the Brickyard 400 was nearly as big of a mistake as the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series leaving IRP. I think that was a mammoth mistake. I think that was one reason that the Brickyard 400 was still special, was that you had to be in the Cup Series to run it. Once they blurred that line, once they stopped running it IRP and they started running the Xfinity Series there, and they probably would have tried to run the Truck Series eventually if they kept going with that, it just completely gutted the event. I think it wasn't special. It wasn't as interesting. The tire failure thing was just a whole other issue. And now here we are, and nobody else is going to be able to win it. And it stinks. And you haven't been able to have fans in there to be able to see it. And it's a tragic situation. And I hate it for the people in Indianapolis. I know how difficult it is to promote a race. I've worked with people in promoting races before. It's very difficult. I mean, and if you have a race that's not selling very well, if you have an event that's had some missteps like the tire situation, and again, not so much Indianapolis's fault, but something that still happened there at their track, it's hard to deal with and it's hard to overcome. And now they're still going to have racing there, but they're going to have to build their traditions completely from scratch. But once that Xfinity race happened earlier this year and had that fantastic finish with AJ Allmendinger and Justin Haley and what was it, Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe, that was a great battle. That was great TV. They played it again on TV the next week during the rain delays. Clearly, the Brickyard 400 was on borrowed time at that point, and it's sad to see, but that's kind of the situation with that. But another road course. I love road course racing. I've been very upfront about that. Of course, born and raised watching races at Sears Point. I think they always put on great shows over there. I'm looking forward to doing it again next June. And we'll see what the situation is going to be on that. But that's another one. And I completely forgot we're going to have the Daytona Infield Road Course. We're not having it as a pointless race, but it's still going to be for the Clash next year. Who knows what that's going to be? But the Clash has been such a complete mess these last few years, and just a needless waste of super speedway cars. Used to be super speedway cars were just like immaculately prepared and just beautifully done. You look at Jeff Gordon's car that won the 2005 Daytona 500 and how proud people were to sign their names on it at the fab shop because of just a work of art those cars were. And you'd have the big ones still at the super speedways, but to build even more cars to run in the Busch Clash and have just a huge pile up from there, and just have the cars be completely expendable at that point, it's unfortunate. But running older cars, perhaps, maybe even in the future when they introduce the next gen car, they'll just use up the last of their stock of the current Gen 6 cars for the Clash or something, and treat it kind of like the backstretch oval race they had for the K&N guys or the modified guys a few years ago. Maybe that'll be kind of the situation. But hang on. There we go. Yeah, kind of an interesting situation from there. But this year's Clash was definitely a joke, but yeah, an entertaining joke. You're right about that. So okay, we're still gonna have the night race at Martinsville. We talked about Circuit of the Americas a little bit. You're gonna have it. I mean, you're still gonna have the 600. I mean, that's good. Having the Roval and the Chase. I thought it was interesting that they didn't change anything in the playoffs. I was kind of expecting they were going to do something with that. It's interesting. I figured they were probably going to get rid of the fall Texas race rather than the spring Texas race, and put something else in there. But they didn't do that. Still have the championship at Phoenix, which is good because they never really got a chance for anybody to go there. They're going to have what, like 15 to 20% capacity. It's insane. You can't buy a ticket there now, even if you wanted to. And you couldn't really a month ago either. Of course, all this contingent on everything else that's going on. Yeah, well, shoot, I didn't realize it. Yeah, the All-Star race is the week after Sears Point. So that'll be interesting. Sears Point will be actually the last chance to punch your ticket into the All-Star race if you pull off a win there. So that'll be something. I guess if Truex or Chase is winless at that point, they'll certainly put their eggs more in that basket again, and that'll be something interesting to go from there. Nashville's going to be on Father's Day. Road America for 4th of July. That's cool. We'll see if it's going to be part. I assume it's going to be part of the Xfinity weekend there. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be the case. It looks like from the IndyCar's calendar that it's not going to be on the same weekend as that, which is too bad. I was hoping they'd have more IndyCar, NASCAR combination events. Maybe the Indy infield road course will do that, but that'll be something to kind of look forward to there. One race at Michigan, that's fine. Darlington's still in the cutoff race. I mean the cutoff race for the championship. I think that's good. I feel like I'm missing something glaring here. I talked a little bit about Chicagoland and Kentucky getting cut. Again, I made mention of this the other day, with the lack of the lack of drivers falling out of races at Chicagoland and how that contributed to some pretty good last car battles there. And they really did. There were some races there that I thought it was going to go all the way to the wire and you're going to have two cars that were on the same lap, 15 laps down, battling for last. We very nearly had that a couple times. But my frame of reference on that is completely different than anybody watched at the beginning of the race. As far as I know, I guess Truex was just a shoe-in for a lot of those until Bowman won there. Bowman had a great battle there with Kyle Larson at the end of that one. I thought that was Chicago, right? There was Chicago versus Kansas. Well, that's the other problem with Chicago is it's always confused with Kansas a lot, which is bizarre because Kansas has really kind of come into its own and had some decent races. But Chicagoland, that slight difference of just having the backstretch curved instead of straightened out, and the fact that Kansas got the repave, somehow just those differences alone have just made those tracks just worlds apart in terms of competitiveness and attrition and just whatever else. And I know that the drivers experience these tracks completely different than viewers do, but that's just a bizarre thing, and it just didn't work in their favor. Kentucky, though, on the other hand, that was a mistake from the start. I mean, I think if you look at the history of Kentucky, the reason that there was so much of a controversy over Kentucky getting into the Cup Series calendar to begin with was that NASCAR didn't want them to put that track there. The people that put that track together before it got bought up by whichever one it was, I don't remember if it was ISC or SMI, before it got bought up by somebody, they built this track, but it was already in a venue where people could already go to Bristol, or they can go to Martinsville, or they can go to these other tracks that are near, that are already established there. And it wasn't in a market. It wasn't in a suitable market to be that successful of a track. It was unfortunate. It was an unfortunate decision. We talked about this in the video I did with NASCAR Man, the one about the fact that big market areas were a big issue when they built these 1.5-mile tracks. It's like, okay, we know it's got to be in Vegas. We know we got to do it in LA. We know we got to do it in Chicago. We know we got to, if they could put one in Manhattan, they were going to do that because these were going to be the places that they knew they had to have a presence in. In Kentucky, that wasn't that high of a list. That wasn't really that high on that list. The concern was from the get-go that this track was put on there and just not in the right area. Maybe if they put Kentucky somewhere else, maybe if they configured it a little different, it would be somewhere else there. Heck, it would even conflict with Nashville coming back here, in everything there. So, that's a different. It was SMI. Okay, thank you. No, that was a different. Yeah, so that was the situation with that. So it's unfortunate, and I hate it for them because much like with the Brickyard 400, they had all kinds of problems with it. They had that problem with traffic in 2011, where people just had to walk out of their cars to get to the track, and even when they did, they only got there like halfway through the race, and Kyle Busch won it in a walk. They fixed the traffic problem. But then, they had, just not very good races there over the years. People like, Keselowski or Truex would just win it and just dominate it. It just hasn't had that many competitive races. And then, of course, you have this year where just out of the blue, you have this amazing 4 or 5 wide finish and Cole Custer wins. But can you name anything else that happened in the entire race? I'm having a hard time even remembering who finished last in that one. That's the unfortunate situation there with Kentucky. And that was, it's too bad, but it's true that it just worked out that way. And I hate it for their fans. I know that I'm sure there are people out there that love going to races in Kentucky, that love going to races in Chicago. But NASCAR has reached this point now, and maybe it's just like what we saw with the teams in 2004, where they do have to, kind of shrink down a little bit. And NASCAR has always had a hard time with that. They always like, oh, if you're not getting bigger, you're getting smaller. It's like, no. Look, sometimes you have to kind of circle the wagons a little bit and protect what's working best and just cut out the stuff that's not. But I've never been to Kentucky. I've never been to Chicagoland. It could be that they're perfectly great tracks. I have heard problems about the infield at Kentucky, that there was just a lot of open and not really well-designed space, that it's impossible to get from one end of the garage area to the other. Very briefly, there were concerns about that. Chicagoland, on the other hand, it sounded like they had their ducks in a row a little better when they didn't have the giant inflatable orange fall on the track at some point. But yeah, it's a different situation there. No tires, just gas. Just seeing your comment there on Natalie Decker. Yes, certainly. Again, hoping for the best for her. I know we talked about her during our Sunday show. Apparently she's not going to be in the 44 again this week. It was announced earlier that Kaz Gralla is going to be driving in her place in the 44. So hoping that she's certainly doing well with whatever she's dealing with. I haven't heard anything new about her medical condition or anything that I've seen on there, so we're certainly not going to speculate on that. Just certainly wishing her the best, of course. Yeah, I mean it's a tricky situation with a lot of these tracks, but I think NASCAR has done something interesting with this schedule. But I think part of this probably should have been a reduction in the number of races, and certainly not adding 2 venues to these tracks. I like Atlanta. I'd love to check it out. I think it's a great venue. When they said they were going to announce 2 dates, I thought they were considering putting it in the fall and maybe positioning it to at least have a season finale for a future event. That has clearly not been the case. They're going to still run Phoenix next year. Running it in July in Atlanta sounds like a terrible idea unless they're going to do it at night. And even then, it may be. There were a lot of issues with heat exhaustion back at Martinsville. You remember when that was at night, just this past, what was that, June? You had problems with that. So I don't know. I mean, having the March date, that's fine. That's a good location for that. It definitely deserves to be on the schedule. It's a venerated track. It's an old surface. It's a lot of fun there to watch. I think the multiple grooves. I think it's a track that, much like a lot of these, is probably better seeing in person than not. Homestead, I like that Homestead's in February after Daytona. That kind of reminds me of the old Truck Series schedule when you had Homestead be the opener before Daytona was. And of course, having 2 races in Florida and just banging those out, in a row like that, I think that's a good way to do it. But Bristol dirt, I don't know. I mean, what if it rains? I mean, you're going to have, I don't know. But clearly they're not going to get rid of 2 races at Talladega and 2 races at Daytona if they're going to have Talladega in the playoffs and have Daytona as the cutoff race. So maybe that's what's gumming up the works of them reducing the schedule much more than they already have. So yeah, what if it snows? Exactly, said Ed. So that would be another one. But that'll be interesting. Oh, said Ed too. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, man. I hope you enjoyed the video for sure. But that'll be an interesting one. But yeah. So let's see. I know I had some requests for trivia here. We're not going to do that tonight. I've already taken up plenty of your guys' time already between the live stream here and then seeing the video earlier. And of course, especially on a weekday here, we'll save that for our the Sunday show after the Cup race at Talladega. That'll be our next full show on that one. But that'll be something that we'll look up here. The football game's bad. Oh, okay. I don't watch too much Thursday night football. That's usually not too good on there. Can we get a couple surprises on the Xfinity or truck schedule? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, I don't know how it's gonna work out on that, but that'll be. Oh, it's a tank bowl. Oh, okay, right on. But that'll be that'll be interesting on that. Let's see. Let me just think here. Is there anything else I haven't touched on the schedule? I feel like I've missed something here between. Let me get the thing poked up here. Yeah, Darlington, Circuit of the Americas. Yeah, just counting down the days. I can't believe it's going to be. I mean, well, we're right now. I guess I'll close with here is what we're looking at for coverage next year. Now, again, the big thing for for right now is you know, getting access to the garage area is going to be absolutely critical. And I know NASCAR has made it plain what their statement is and what their conditions are for allowing that to happen again. When that is going to happen or not, is it going to be at the end of the season? Is it going to be the beginning of next year? Who knows? But tentatively speaking, at the very least, we're looking at Fontana in February to see the last race on the 2 mile oval. We're looking at Sears Point in June and we're looking at Phoenix for the finale in November. These were the 3 races that we were originally going to do this year. We did do Fontana this year in February. That was originally going to be our schedule this year. So 2021 is most likely going to be our hard reset and try to do that as best as possible. But those are ones we're looking at. Beyond that on the schedule, that's going to depend on how things kind of work out. If we can kind of maybe link some races together and try to get some more coverage for you guys. And also, of course, again, when they're going to start letting media do their jobs again and get into the infield. I think at some point here, we're going to have to realize, and I know this is from the same guy that put the better safe than sorry video out back in March on my second channel. Hindsight is 2020, of course. Well, and 2020 is 2020. But I think that this is going to be a different different situation going forward. But I hope that we can get back into a situation where we can actually have media access to the infield. I think that it's really kind of hampered some of the coverage here. We don't even get to see really the paint schemes on these cars until practically the last minute, which is actually kind of an issue. Which one thing I am working on right now. I do have a bonus video coming up for you guys. I think it's going to be ready either late Friday or early Saturday, depending on when it's finished. I am going to be doing a starting grid video for this weekend's race in Talladega. Reason for that is I re-reached my first stretch goal in the Livestream, and we had the members in there vote on it. We only got a few votes, but I had that in there, and the voters wanted Talladega this weekend for what was going to be unofficially. It sounds like I thought it was officially Brendan Gaughan's last start in NASCAR's Top 3 Series. So look forward to that. So those of you who like starting grids, it's not going to be too over the top in terms of production design, but I'm definitely going to do one. I already have the script written for it. Did that last night. Luckily, the early release of the qualifying results is kind of make it a little bit easier to set it up than it would be under ordinary circumstances. So we'll have that set up for you guys here this weekend. Of course, before Sunday's race. So look forward to that. And that'll be on here on the main channel. And depending on when I get it done, I want to make sure that those in the Patreon will have advanced access to it, those in the $5 and up levels on that. Yeah, I think that's about all I have for you guys tonight here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We're up to about an hour here. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. And thank you again for tuning in to my video here, Rise of the Field Fillers. Again, just the first episode. That's not the full thing. There's lots more to cover. We barely scratched the surface of who these teams were or what these teams were and who was involved in them and everything like that. So there's going to be much more to come on that. And we'll have some more announcements on that very soon, including what the next episode subject is going to be. And I'm very excited to bring that to you guys. So again, in the meantime, the Twitter is @LastCarOnBrock. The Patreon, patreon.com /LastCarOnBrock. I'm getting much mouth here. And the website, of course, is lastcar.info. So you want to see your Talladega preview. That was posted earlier today. And we'll have coverage, of course, for the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series this weekend. And on Sunday, I'm going to do really in these next few days in Alabama. So thank you again for tuning in, and hope to see you guys again Sunday. Remember, folks, life happens. So take it easy, everyone. Oop. There we go.